The night I lost my family, I found myself. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. My mother looked at my new house, not with pride, but calculating how much it could sell for to save her favorite son. It was a crisp Tuesday evening, the kind where the sunset paints the living room in warm, golden hues. My business partner and best friend, Sarah, was in the kitchen laughing over a design mock-up we had just finalized for our agency's biggest client. I was 28, holding a glass of wine in a home I had bought with my own blood, sweat, and tears. For 5 years, my life had been a sanctuary of peace, entirely devoid of the toxic chaos that defined my youth. Then, the doorbell rang. The chime echoed through the high ceilings of my foyer, a sound that usually meant a food delivery or a friendly neighbor. I pulled open the heavy oak door with a smile, completely unprepared for the ghost standing on my porch. Eleanor, my mother. She hadn't aged well. The impeccably styled hair was a little thinner, the designer coat a little frayed at the cuffs, but her eyes held the exact same cold, calculating sharpness they always had. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask how I was, or marvel at the fact that the daughter she threw onto the street was standing in a $2 million home. Instead, she pushed past me, her eyes scanning the expensive artwork and the custom furniture like an appraiser looking for liquid assets. "Clara," she said, her voice dripping with that familiar, demanding entitlement. "Julian is in serious trouble. We need $1 million by Friday, or he's going to federal prison. I know you have it. You're going to write the check." The audacity paralyzed me. 5 years of absolute silence. 5 years of letting the entire extended family believe I was a thieving drug addict who had run away, all while I was scrubbing floors and sleeping on Sarah's old sofa just to survive. And here she was, standing in the sanctuary I built, demanding my wealth to save the very brother whose actions had destroyed my life in the first place. My heart hammered against my ribs, an involuntary trauma response I thought I had therapyed away years ago. The smell of her expensive perfume brought the worst night of my entire existence rushing back with terrifying clarity. I was no longer a successful CEO. I was suddenly that terrified 23-year-old girl all over again. I realized then that my nightmare was far from over. Growing up, my house wasn't a home. It was a courtroom where I was perpetually the defendant and my brother Julian was the flawless, untouchable saint. The dynamic was established early and enforced with ruthless consistency by Eleanor. Julian, 3 years older, was handsome, charming, and possessed a natural magnetism that easily masked his deep-seated incompetence. If Julian got a C on a math test, it was because the teacher was biased against him. If I got an A-, I was interrogated about why I hadn't studied harder for the perfect score. I was the scapegoat, the designated receptacle for every failure, frustration, and dark mood that entered our superficially perfect suburban household. To survive, I became a timid, chronic people-pleaser, shrinking myself to take up as little space as possible. I remember my high school graduation vividly. I had earned a full academic scholarship to a state university, a monumental achievement that I hoped would finally earn me a shred of validation. Instead, on the day of my ceremony, Julian, who had just dropped out of his second private college, managed to total my father's luxury sedan while completely inebriated. Rather than attending my graduation, my parents spent the entire day dealing with the police and lawyers, furiously spinning a narrative about how Julian had swerved to avoid a stray dog. When I finally came home, still wearing my cap and gown, clutching my diploma, Eleanor didn't even look at me. She just pointed to the kitchen and snapped, "Your brother is highly traumatized by his accident, Clara. Stop parading around and make him something to eat." That was my role. I was the invisible maid, the emotional punching bag, the buffer between Julian and the consequences of his own reckless existence. I absorbed their toxicity because I genuinely believed that if I was just good enough, quiet enough, and helpful enough, they would eventually love me. It took a catastrophic disaster to brutally shatter that illusion and show me just how expendable I truly was to the people who shared my blood. The illusion died completely on a rain-soaked night in November. It was 2 days before my 24th birthday. I was living at home, saving money from my entry-level accounting job, desperately trying to map out an escape plan. A torrential downpour was hammering against the windows, masking the sounds of the neighborhood. At exactly 2:14 a.m., the shrill ring of the house phone shattered the silence. I heard Eleanor's frantic footsteps running down the hallway, followed by a muffled, panicked conversation. 10 minutes later, the heavy oak front door slammed open, letting in a gust of freezing wind and rain. I crept out of my bedroom and peered over the banister. Julian was standing in the marble foyer, swaying violently. He was absolutely soaked, his designer shirt torn to shreds, and his face was smeared with mud and a terrifying amount of fresh, dark blood. He wasn't just drunk. He was completely incoherent, practically hyperventilating as Eleanor grabbed his shoulders. "What did you do, Julian? Look at me. What did you do?" she hissed, her voice trembling with an uncharacteristic panic. Julian collapsed onto the bottom step, burying his bloody face in his hands. "The company car," he sobbed, his words slurring together. "I took Dad's company car. I was at the club. I didn't see it, Mom. The light was green. I swear it was green." Eleanor shook him violently. "You hit something? Julian, tell me right now, did you hit someone?" He shook his head wildly. "No, a building. I lost control on Fifth Avenue and went right through the front of that antique store. The whole storefront collapsed, Mom. It's gone. I panicked. I just ran. I ran all the way here. My stomach plummeted into a bottomless abyss." Julian had just committed a massive, catastrophic felony. He was looking at a ruined storefront, multiple DUI charges, leaving the scene of an accident, and the total destruction of my father's corporate vehicle. The sheer magnitude of the disaster was suffocating. Then, Eleanor slowly turned her head and looked directly up the stairs at me. Her expression morphed from terror into something completely devoid of humanity. She looked at me not as a daughter, but as a convenient, disposable solution. The silence in the foyer was heavier than the thunderstorm raging outside. Eleanor let go of Julian, who was still weeping pathetically into his hands, and walked slowly up the stairs toward me. Her face was a mask of terrifying, icy resolve. She grabbed my arm, her manicured nails biting painfully into my skin, and dragged me down into the kitchen. "Listen to me very carefully, Clara," she whispered, her voice a razor-sharp blade. "The police are going to find that car. They are going to trace it back to this house within the hour. Julian cannot go to prison. He just got accepted into the executive training program. He has a real future. A criminal record will destroy everything he's meant to be." I stared at her, my mind completely blank with shock, unable to process the words coming out of her mouth. "What are you saying?" I stammered. Eleanor didn't blink. "You're going to tell the police you took the car. You're going to say you sneaked out, had a few drinks, and lost control. You have a clean record. It's your first offense. You'll just get probation, maybe some community service. We will hire the best lawyers to make sure you don't serve real time." The room began to spin. The sheer, breathtaking cruelty of her demand struck me with the physical force of a freight train. She was asking me to confess to a felony. She was asking me to destroy my clean record, my accounting career, and my entire future, just to shield her golden child from the consequences of his own drunken negligence. I can't do that," I whispered, tears finally spilling hot and fast down my cheeks. "I have my CPA exams next month. If I have a felony, I lose my job. I lose everything, Mom. You can't ask me to do this." Eleanor's eyes narrowed into dark, venomous slits. She wasn't pleading with me. She was issuing a command to a subordinate. "You owe this family, Clara. We have housed you, fed you, and put up with your mediocrity for 23 years. It is time you finally made yourself useful." The realization that I meant absolutely nothing to her broke me into a million pieces. A strange, unfamiliar fire suddenly ignited in the hollow pit of my stomach. For 23 years, I had bent over backwards, swallowed my pride, and accepted my role as the family punching bag. But this was a bridge too far. This was my literal freedom. I looked at Julian, who was still cowering on the stairs, perfectly willing to let his little sister burn so he could keep his comfortable life. Then I looked back at the woman who gave birth to me. "No," I said, my voice trembling but remarkably clear. "No, I am not going to jail for him. Call the police, Mom. Tell them the truth." Eleanor's face contorted with a demonic, unfiltered rage I had never witnessed before. She slapped me. The crack of her hand against my cheek echoed like a gunshot over the thunder. The force threw me off balance, sending me crashing against the kitchen island. "You ungrateful, selfish little bitch," she spat, her voice a terrifying, guttural snarl. "If you will not protect this family, then you are no longer a part of it. Get out." I touched my burning cheek, staring at her in disbelief. "Mom, it's freezing rain. I don't have my car keys. I don't have anywhere to go." She didn't care. She grabbed me by the collar of my pajamas and physically dragged me toward the front door. I fought back, begging, crying, pleading with her to stop, but she was fueled by absolute, manic desperation. She threw me onto the porch, right into the freezing, torrential downpour. "You are dead to me," she screamed over the wind. "You leave right now, or I will tell the police you stole the car, crashed it, and attacked me when I tried to stop you. Who do you think they'll believe, Clara? The successful executive, or the jealous, unstable sister?" She slammed the heavy oak door shut, the deadbolt clicking with terrifying finality. I was standing in the freezing rain, barefoot, wearing only thin cotton pajamas, with no phone, no wallet, and no family. I walked into the dark, freezing night, completely alone and terrified for my life. The next 48 hours were a blur of hypothermia, humiliation, and survival. I walked 3 miles in the freezing rain to a 24-hour diner, begging the waitress to let me use the landline. I called the only person I trusted, a coworker named Sarah. She drove out in the middle of the night, wrapped me in blankets, and let me crash on her dilapidated sofa. I was entirely dependent on the kindness of a woman I barely knew. A few days later, I finally managed to buy a cheap prepaid phone and logged into my social media accounts to see if anyone was looking for me. What I found made me physically violently ill. Eleanor had not wasted a single second. To cover up Julian's sudden legal troubles, because Detective Hayes, a sharp-eyed local cop, hadn't bought the stolen car narrative for a second, Eleanor initiated a scorched earth smear campaign against me. She called every aunt, uncle, cousin, and family friend. She posted long, tearful updates on Facebook. The story was a masterpiece of manipulation. Clara had developed a severe drug addiction, stole thousands of dollars in jewelry from the house to buy narcotics, and ran away into the night when confronted. She explicitly warned everyone not to contact me, claiming I was dangerous and unstable. I tried to call my favorite Aunt May, the one person I thought would see through the lies. She answered, but her voice was dripping with disgust. "Don't ever call this number again, Clara. Get help," she snapped before hanging up. My entire support system was instantly obliterated. They all believed the wealthy, perfectly manicured mother over the quiet, awkward daughter. I lost my accounting job because I didn't show up for a week. I had no savings, no car, no degree, and my reputation was in absolute ruins. Eleanor had meticulously executed her promise to destroy me. I spent nights crying so hard on Sarah's couch that I threw up, suffocating under the weight of the injustice. I had hit absolute rock bottom, buried under a mountain of my own family's lies. Rock bottom is a terrifying place, but it has one distinct advantage. It provides a remarkably solid foundation on which to rebuild. The turning point came when Sarah, who had watched me wallow in grief for 3 weeks, finally handed me a cup of coffee and said, "Clara, they killed the old you. So stop mourning a ghost and figure out who the new you is going to be." She was right. I couldn't fix the past, but I had total control over my future. We pooled our meager resources, packed up her beat-up Honda Civic, and moved 4 states away to a sprawling, vibrant city where nobody knew my name or Eleanor's lies. The rebirth was excruciatingly slow and endlessly painful. We worked grueling double shifts at a terrible restaurant just to make rent for our tiny, roach-infested apartment. But every night, we sat at our wobbly kitchen table, drinking cheap tea, and built a digital marketing agency from scratch. I poured every ounce of my trauma, my anger, and my relentless need for justice into the business. I taught myself coding, SEO, and client management. Sarah brought the creative vision. Without Eleanor's constant criticism echoing in my head, my natural intelligence finally flourished. I wasn't the stupid, mediocre scapegoat anymore. I was a shark. By year 3, we landed our first 6-figure corporate contract. By year 4, we bought a sleek office downtown. By year 5, I purchased my dream home in cash. I had meticulously crafted a life of genuine wealth, deep peace, and chosen family. Sarah was my real sister now. I had gone to intensive therapy, processed the horrific betrayal, and finally recognized my own inherent worth. I was invincible, untouchable, and profoundly happy. I had won the war by simply refusing to play their toxic game anymore. But toxic families never truly let you go. They just wait until they need you again. Which brings us right back to my foyer, 5 years later, with the ghost of my mother standing on my expensive hardwood floors, demanding $1 million. The shock was slowly wearing off, replaced by a cold, clinical detachment. $1 million. I repeated, my voice steady and devoid of the terror she expected to hear. What exactly did your golden child do this time, Eleanor? She frowned, clearly irritated that I wasn't immediately trembling and opening my checkbook. She paced across my foyer, looking completely out of place in my peaceful home. Julian was promoted to chief financial officer of a major tech firm. She began, her tone defensive. He made some irregular transfers. It was an honest mistake, Clara, an accounting error. But the board is threatening to go to the federal authorities on Friday unless the missing funds are completely restored. He'll go to prison. They'll ruin his life. I almost laughed out loud. Embezzlement. Julian hadn't just made an error. He had stolen $1 million from his employer, likely to fund the extravagant lifestyle he could never actually afford. And now that he was caught, they expected the daughter they threw out like trash to foot the bill. So, let me get this straight, I said, crossing my arms. You disown me, tell our entire family I'm a drug-addicted thief, leave me homeless, and now you want me to liquidate my assets to save Julian from federal prison? Eleanor had the nerve to look impatient, checking her designer watch. That is all in the past, Clara. We are family. You have obviously done very well for yourself. It is your duty to help your brother in his time of need. Do not be selfish. The sheer audacity was staggering. She didn't view me as a daughter who had miraculously survived and thrived. She simply viewed me as an untapped bank account. She honestly believed she still held the power to command my absolute obedience. Eleanor took a step closer, her voice softening into that faux-maternal tone she always used when she was preparing to strike. Look at this house, Clara. Look at the life you have. You wouldn't have any of this if I hadn't pushed you to be independent. In a way, you owe your success to me. The psychological manipulation was so textbook, so blatantly transparent, that I actually felt a wave of secondhand embarrassment for her. She was expecting the timid, broken 23-year-old girl who would do anything for a scrap of her mother's approval. She had no idea she was speaking to a woman who negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts before breakfast. You threw me into a freezing storm without shoes, Eleanor. You told Aunt May I was a junkie. I replied, my voice dangerously calm. You didn't push me to be independent. You tried to destroy me. Eleanor waved her hand dismissively, as if swatting away a minor annoyance. People say things they don't mean when they are under extreme stress. Julian was in a terrible accident. You were being difficult. We did what we had to do to protect our family's reputation. Now, are you going to write the check, or do I need to bring my lawyers into this? The threat was laughable. She had absolutely no legal leverage, but her arrogance blinded her to reality. She truly believed that blood gave her the right to raid my life whenever she saw fit. A brilliant, terrifying idea began to form in the back of my mind. If I flat out refused, she would just leave, find another way to bail Julian out, and continue living her pristine, deceitful life. Julian would escape justice yet again. I didn't just want to say no. I wanted to burn their entire fraudulent empire to the ground, once and for all. I needed them to walk right into a trap they couldn't escape. I lowered my gaze, pretending to look torn, and softly asked for 24 hours to think. Eleanor's eyes lit up with predatory triumph. She smiled, a thin, chilling stretching of her lips. I knew you'd see reason, Clara. I will bring Julian to your office tomorrow at noon to sign the wire transfer documents. She turned and walked out the door without another word. The moment her car pulled out of my driveway, Sarah emerged from the kitchen, her eyes wide. Tell me you are not actually going to give that monster a single dime of our money, she said, her fists clenched. I smiled, feeling a rush of pure adrenaline. Not a chance in hell, but I'm going to give them exactly what they deserve. I spent the next 14 hours locked in my home office, using every digital resource my agency had at its disposal. I dug deeply into Julian's tech firm, tracing the public records and analyzing the corporate filings. Embezzling $1 million leaves a massive digital footprint if you know where to look. But the real breakthrough happened at 3 a.m. I found a massive payout linked to Julian's accounts dating exactly 5 years ago, the exact week of his drunk driving crash. He hadn't just crashed the car. He had hit a pedestrian, a young woman whose family agreed to a massive, quiet settlement to avoid a lengthy trial. Eleanor had paid them off to keep Julian out of jail, and Julian had been secretly embezzling money from his new firm to pay back the loan sharks Eleanor had used to get the settlement cash so quickly. The two crimes were inextricably linked. The antique store crash was a cover story. The reality was so much darker. My mother had asked me to take the fall for a hit and run that nearly killed an innocent person. The magnitude of their depravity was breathtaking. I had the bank statements. I had the digital trail. But I needed one final, crucial piece to ensure they went away for a very long time. I needed the one man who had always suspected they were lying 5 years ago. At 8 a.m. the next morning, I picked up the phone and dialed the local precinct of my old hometown. I asked for Detective Hayes. When his gruff, weathered voice came through the receiver, I felt a strange sense of profound relief. Detective Hayes? This is Clara. You probably don't remember me, but 5 years ago. He cut me off immediately. The hit and run on 5th Avenue. Your brother Julian's wrecked company car. I remember you, Clara. Your mother told the department you had a breakdown and vanished. I never bought her story. Not for a single second. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for half a decade. You were right, detective. She lied. Julian was driving. He was blackout drunk. She tried to force me to take the fall, and when I refused, she kicked me out and fabricated the drug rumors. I laid everything out for him. I explained the embezzlement, the secret settlement, the loan sharks, and the digital paper trail I had spent all night compiling. The silence on the other end of the line was thick with professional anticipation. I knew that family was dirty, Hayes finally muttered. I could never prove the hit and run because the victim's family suddenly stopped cooperating and moved away. If you have proof of the payoff, we can reopen the criminal case. And the feds will definitely want the embezzlement files. I told him about the meeting I had scheduled with Eleanor and Julian at my office at noon. I told him I was going to get them to confess on tape, and I needed him there, waiting in the wings with the necessary warrants. Hayes didn't hesitate. I'll coordinate with the local authorities in your city and the feds. We will be in your building by 11:30 a.m. Don't let them leave. The pieces were finally set. It was time to spring the ultimate trap. The next 3 hours were a whirlwind of meticulous preparation. Sarah and I transformed my sleek, glass-walled conference room into a high-tech snare. I printed out every single piece of evidence I had uncovered. The encrypted bank transfers, the offshore shell company Julian used to hide the embezzled funds, the original loan documents Eleanor signed 5 years ago, and the massive payout to the hit-and-run victim's family. I arranged them into 2 neat, damning folders. Then, we tested the hidden microphones embedded in the conference table, ensuring that every whisper would be perfectly captured on our secure servers. At 11:45 a.m., Detective Hayes and 2 federal agents in sharp suits arrived through the private freight elevator. They positioned themselves in the adjoining office, out of sight, but able to hear every word through our live audio feed. My heart was thumping a steady, powerful rhythm against my ribs. I wasn't afraid. For the first time in my entire life, I held all the cards, all the power, and all the truth. At exactly noon, the receptionist buzzed my phone. Clara, your mother and brother are here to see you. I took a deep breath, smoothing down my tailored blazer. I looked at Sarah, who gave me a fierce, encouraging nod. Send them back to the main conference room, I instructed calmly. I poured myself a glass of sparkling water, picked up the 2 thick folders of evidence, and walked down the hallway. I could see them through the frosted glass doors. Julian looked pale, sweating profusely in a suit that was suddenly too loose for him. Eleanor looked exactly as she always did, arrogant, impatient, and utterly convinced of her own supreme untouchability. I pushed open the glass doors, ready to execute my family's spectacular downfall. Eleanor didn't bother greeting me as I walked in. She immediately pointed to a stack of blank papers she had brought with her. Sit down, Clara. We have the wire transfer details prepared. You need to authorize the release of the $1 million immediately. The tech firm's lawyers are waiting for my call. Julian couldn't even look me in the eye. He was staring at his shaking hands, a pathetic portrait of a grown man still hiding behind his mother's skirt. I didn't sit down. I stood at the head of the polished mahogany table, looking down at the two people who had destroyed my youth. Before I sign anything, Eleanor, I need to clarify a few details from my own financial records, I said, my voice projecting clearly to ensure the microphones picked up every syllable. Julian, you embezzled this money to pay off the loan Shark's mother used to fund the secret settlement 5 years ago, correct? Julian flinched as if I had physically struck him. Eleanor's face drained of color, her arrogant mask slipping for the very first time. I don't know what you were talking about, she snapped, her voice wavering slightly. Sign the papers, Clara. Stop playing these ridiculous games. I opened the first folder and slid a copy of the loan documents across the table. You paid off the family of the girl Julian hit with the company car. You covered up a felony hit and run, Eleanor. And when I refused to go to prison for him, you destroyed my life. So tell me right now, on the record, Julian drove the car and you covered it up. Admit it, or I walk out of this room right now and you get nothing. The panic in the room was palpable. Eleanor looked at the documents, then at Julian's terrified face. Desperate to secure the money, she made the final, fatal mistake of telling the truth. Eleanor slammed her hands on the table, her composure completely shattered. Yes, he was driving. She screamed, her face flushed with frantic rage. He hit that girl, and I paid them off to save his life. I did what a real mother does. I protected my son. And you owed us, Clara. You were nothing, and he was everything. Now sign the damn wire transfer before his entire life is ruined. The silence that followed her screaming confession was absolutely deafening. I looked at her, feeling a profound, overwhelming sense of closure. I'm not signing anything, Eleanor, I said softly. And Julian's life is already ruined. Before she could formulate a response, the heavy door to the adjoining office swung open. Detective Hayes walked in, his badge flashing under the fluorescent lights, followed closely by the 2 federal agents. Eleanor gasped, stumbling backward and knocking her expensive designer chair to the floor. Julian let out a pathetic, high-pitched whimper and buried his face in his hands, just like he had on that rainy night 5 years ago. Eleanor and Julian, Detective Hayes said, his voice ringing with absolute authority. You are both under arrest. Julian, you're facing federal charges for corporate embezzlement and leaving the scene of an accident resulting in severe bodily injury. Eleanor, you are being charged with obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and accessory to a felony. One of the federal agents aggressively pulled Julian's arms behind his back, the metallic click of the handcuffs echoing loudly in the silent room. Eleanor was hyperventilating, desperately trying to pull away from the officer grabbing her wrists. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of absolute terror and utter disbelief. Her pristine, untouchable world was violently collapsing in real time. As they dragged her away, she screamed my name, but I felt absolutely nothing. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office and watched the police cruisers pull away from the curb, their sirens entirely silent, but their lights flashing brilliantly against the city skyline. Julian was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. Eleanor, despite her expensive lawyers, received 5 years for her extensive role in the cover-up and the financial fraud. The local news ran the story for weeks, completely vindicating my name and exposing the horrific reality behind their pristine suburban facade. The family members who had shunned me suddenly tried to reach out, sending long, apologetic emails and voicemails. I blocked every single one of them. You do not get to participate in my joyful present when you actively chose to applaud my destruction in the past. Losing my biological family was the most agonizing, terrifying experience of my life, but it was also the greatest gift I could have ever received. The night they threw me into the freezing rain, they didn't destroy me. They simply set me free from a cage I didn't know how to unlock myself. I found my worth. I built my own empire. Most importantly, I found my true family in people like Sarah, who loved me for my heart and my hustle, not for what they could extract from me. To anyone out there who is currently playing the role of the family scapegoat, desperately trying to earn the love of people who only view you as a resource, stop bleeding for people who wouldn't give you a band-aid. Walking away from toxic bloodlines feels like dying, but I promise you, it is actually the first breath of your real life. The universe has so much more waiting for you once you finally refuse to accept their abuse. Your real life begins the exact moment you finally decide to walk away forever.